Our first episode of the Founder CEO Show, kicking it off with Cathy Lee-Sepsick, founder and CEO of Femisys. She's been running Femisys for 20 plus years with a deep commitment to women's healthcare. We talk about her preparation to evolve in her roles through the years, balancing innovation with commercialization of her products, the importance of women's healthcare, her conversations with Congress and the White House on the topic of women's healthcare, what it's like to IPO a company, and people trying to take her job. Join us for this interesting conversation with Cathy. Cathy, thank you so much for joining me. It's good to be talking to you about Femisys. I want to kick it off just understanding why you started Femisys.
I felt that there was such a dire need in women's healthcare. For me personally, being a woman and looking at options for permanent birth control, I just felt that it was very lacking and that we could do better. So it's really that explicit product, FemBlock, is why I started the company. And then of course we evolved into adding additional products, but it was really just this awareness of why don't we have better options? Why should someone have to go through something that's invasive and the additional risks around surgery for a basic healthcare need? And I felt I was in a proper position to invent and create something that would be acceptable to myself and therefore hopefully acceptable to other women.
Hey, and you've been running Femisys for 20 years. How has the evolution of women's medical technology evolved over those 20 years?
It's in some ways it stayed the same. Where we still see a lack of innovation in key critical areas. Unfortunately, that continues. Where I have seen some dramatic changes is large companies that have decided to not have women's health initiatives. Johnson & Johnson's a good example, not to pick on them. When I started Femisys, and I'm from New Jersey, so J&J headquarters in New Brunswick. I went to Rutgers. It's right there, and I was so excited when I started the company and saw kind of the work that they were doing, and then years later they decided to kind of fold those efforts and not have a prominent leading effort in women's health. It's really surprising. There's other companies that have done the same. So the landscape got actually in many ways worse, where there's smaller key critical players. And then the still same lack of innovation, lack of funding, lack of support, but more and more awareness of the fact that women do deserve and need additional options. So it's kind of, unfortunately, some of the same and some of it worse.
And recently you had the opportunity to talk to Congress and the White House. Is that correct, about women's healthcare issues? Can you share some of the things you spoke about and the things they're focused on and how Femisys plays a role in addressing some of this?
Yeah, it was such an honor to be invited to speak to members of Congress. For those meetings, it was overwhelming, supportive of the work that we're doing for women's health and an underlying, how can we be helpful? What can we do? How can we support, more attention, expediting, all of those things. The White House was a whole new level of extra specialness. It's such a unbelievable opportunity to be invited to speak to two major offices related to women's health. I spoke to the Gender Policy Group and the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And the sentiment across both of those groups was, the uniqueness around the technologies that we're working on, wanting to understand what the trials and tribulations were, and then looking forward, which is most important to me personally, is what do we do now that we all are aware that things are broken? How do we help work together to fix it? And there are initiatives through this administration and through just the work that these unique women are doing to kind of draw a spotlight and try to deploy even funding to later stage companies, which is not typical. Normally you would see early stage funding. I've always been told I was too late, yet I was always early. So, how do we become part of the discussion to accelerate things so we can bring our technologies to women, which was always the goal for me personally and for the company.
I'm going to pivot a little bit. Something I'm very curious about is you're a scientist, you're an inventor, and a founder and a CEO, and there's kind of a juxtaposition, a founder and CEO, like an inventor and commercializing. I'm curious on how you have evolved as a business leader and throughout running Femisys for 2 decades.
So I actually started more on the commercial side in my early years of my med tech experience, more on the sales and marketing side, product management. So I had business development. I had some of those skills going into deciding to start Femisys. As an inventor, actually all of these patents that I'm privileged to be leading the effort on, I think we have 150 now filed globally. That was more the newer part for me, to take my ideas and actually materialize them, knowing the markets I understood well, what they needed, what the solutions needed to look like, and all the parties involved, thinking in terms of the perspective of the patient, the practitioner. Because oftentimes I'll see technology not be invented that way. In order for things to be the safest possible, they have to align to skill sets. So I was so attuned to that in my product management roles that I had previous. So it was a natural thing for me to join those parts of myself. But evolving with Femisys, I took the company public in June of 2021. So I worked diligently to make sure I would be an appropriate public CEO and what that entailed. I started to prepare the company 5 years before I took the company public, and the window opened for us, and we went. And I, as an example, did it without a CFO. So you can only do that if you're prepared. And I was 20 something female founder to do it in the history of the NASDAQ. So I'm quite honored about that as well. So it's just preparedness has been key. And now this leg of the race, as we shift more to commercialization, it's aligning with other CEOs and knowing kind of my own limitations and making sure I staff really proper, particularly at the C level, to help bolster my skill set. But it's always been about bringing it to practitioners and women. That was always the end goal. So the inventions came in line with how do we bring better technology to them, but I always knew what I wanted them to have, so that's kind of back, coming at it from a different angle.
Have you ever had pressure from the investor side to start commercializing before maybe you had thought the product was ready?
Not so much, because we didn't raise the traditional way. So prior to going public, and I think this is another unique part of our story, I had raised our financing strictly through high net worth individuals and family offices. And so they just really believed in the kind of impact we could have on women's health. And we would not be here today for it not be for those individuals that stepped up to support us. We did have an investment from Medtronic, which was definitely a good housekeeping seal of approval. But that was, over $70 million raised in that fashion before we raised through the public offering. So it's always been this passion for my investor group to impact women, to really change the landscape. And that's what these products could potentially do. So there wasn't a pressure to get it out sooner. It was a pressure to always do it right. And that's a very, very unique position to be in. Now that I flip to this side of it, it's all about, inflection points and hitting our milestones and execution. But that's been about that for me myself too, because I don't want to just develop these amazing products and have them be researched and developed and sit on a shelf. That's not the end goal here. The end goal here is for women to be impacted by the work that we're doing. And so it's always been about commercialization. And it's just, in my view, there's a right time to commercialize your assets and be able to support it financially. And for the first time in Femisys history, that time is now for us.
How have you evolved yourself, going back to the evolution of you as a founder and CEO? What did you do personally to make sure that you learn the different stages of being a leader for your business?
I think for me, I'm such a planner at heart that I always could see. I always say I'm 5 years ahead of everyone here. I'm pretty much 5 years ahead of everyone here, and maybe 10 years in some regards. So I kind of knew what was coming. If we were to hit our milestones and be successful and drive towards that, I knew what was coming next and what would be on the horizon. And so I always stepped forward as being bigger than we really are, attending the banking conferences, meeting folks that could help us with different parts of wherever we were in this long journey. So it was really just, it's a preparedness thing for me. And people generally want to be helpful. I think people just tend to not ask. So I lean into that heavily, where I like, network and be strategically at different types of events that could help me personally, but then in turn be helpful to the company.
And what are some of if you could share some stories of low points and high points of running this business? And I'm sure it's been quite the ride.
Yeah, there's been some low points. So what I'd say is, you juggle a lot as a working mom. So when I started Femisys, my daughters were 7 and 4. They're today 27 and 24. So, they grew up with Femisys. This has been part of their lives as much as anything else. And so juggling that, sometimes you get strapped real thin. So I can commiserate with the women out there that are doing it. It gets easier every step of the way. And my daughters are so fully ingrained into what we do at Femisys. It's a gift every day to see the impact I've had on them. They didn't go the other way and say, oh gosh, I never want to go into healthcare. They're both in healthcare. So, it's been that part. So it turned out positive, but I'd say the trials and tribulations of trying to manage and balance, the balance has been challenging at different points in time, because being a CEO and being a founder, every dollar I've raised, I feel very responsible for, and it weighs really heavy. And I know what we're doing can have such an impact in women around the world. So I carry that every day. And so the balance kind of can shift in some ways, maybe people will say the wrong way. And so just always checking myself to make sure that I'm giving to my family, as I'm giving to the company, has been just something I've had to really always challenge myself about.
Was there ever a point in this journey where you're like, I'm done. This is enough?
Not one time. Close, but no, no, I knew I know I'm the right person for every step of this. I'm making sure that I am, and I work hard for it every day. And there have been people that tried to steal my job. And guess what? I'm still here. So you didn't, but I think like when there's moments of those potential successes, you see that. So it's been really exciting to have the right support to make sure that I, as the CEO, as a spokesperson for Femisys, can continue to do what I do best and amass support for the company and get our technologies out to women. So
those moments of someone gunning for your job, are those during the low points or the high points? When did those happen?
They happened all along the way. I think, when you work really hard and you do your job well, I think people think it's so easy. And they're like, I can do that job. But my management team, I have such longevity on my team. There'd be no Femisys without me. And I know it because my team would all walk out the door. So I always felt ultimately I would be secure in my position. Again, I work for it every day too. So it's not something I take for granted. Some of it I'd like to look as flattery that somebody would want to run Femisys because they see what this could be. And some of it I think is just, poor form. But, at the end of the day, this just makes for part of the story. I've been asked to write a book so many times. So that bestseller, which hopefully it would be, comes when I'm done down the line. Can't squeeze another thing in, but I can't wait to share some of the other elements of my story with others that maybe they can learn or see it coming maybe a little bit better than I did the first time it happened, then the second, then the others. You learn and, you put things in perspective differently as you start to get more experience. So
what are some of those key learnings that you would share with entrepreneurs?
Keep yourself healthy. It's one thing that I remind myself, like I go down, a lot of people are relying on me. I feel it now that I just turned 57. I guess women don't generally say their age. So blatantly, but, thank you. So, that's a 57 years of mileage on this body, but I may not look it because people you look young, but, so I'm cognizant of that, to make sure I take care of myself. I was, fortunate to, I'm lucky I don't get sick hardly ever. So running at this pace and having so many people pulling in every direction, like take those moments and make sure you stay healthy. It would be my number one advice. And that affects your family too, right? It affects everything when you as a CEO, you as a mom, you as a spouse, you as whoever, have people that are relying on you. If you don't take care of yourself and you go down, there's a trickle effect to that. So I've been fortunate I haven't had that happen yet. So I'm not planning on it happening, but you go to your annual visits, I make sure my heart's still good, all those things that you take care of yourself. I check those things off the checklist, and I make sure I don't miss, just to make sure I'm here for the long haul.
How about your business leadership style? Could you describe how you lead your team?
Yeah, and I've been complimented as of recently bringing in an amazing commercial team. I'm so thankful, grateful, blown away by the folks that we were able to recruit out of very gainfully, they were all gainfully employed at wonderful companies. So they see the mission here. I'm right there with them in the trenches. I am the CEO that does the work. So I don't just dole the work. I'm there with them. And oftentimes I'm leading the pact at every different area, whether it be regulatory, the commercial. I'm out there talking to the big conglomerates for infertility. I'm involved. I'm present. And I think people really appreciate that. And they don't always see leadership that way. No chip on my shoulder. Someone told me that. Like the fact that I roll up my sleeves the way that I do. I'm in clinical cases. I meet I want to see my technology that I've developed and I've worked so hard. I want to see it. I want to see the patients. I want to hear their stories. It helps rejuvenate me for everything that we're having to go through. So I walk the walk harder than anyone here. And I think it shows that, I'm not bumping the work down the line. We're working on things together and I'm just very present. So that's just the kind of leader I plan on being all the way to the end.
How do you had mentioned before how you are 5, sometimes 10 years ahead of the team, but also have this ability to stay in the trenches. How do you manage that? How do you keep that balance? And how do you keep the team focused?
Yeah, so sometimes I'm just ahead by myself, the 5 year ahead, all by myself, working it out. And then back to the team. One good example of this is, I wholeheartedly believed we would be here today, talking in terms of a commercial footprint and commercializing these assets. So I built infrastructure at Femisys. We do all of our own manufacturing here at Georgia in the US, and that's a very unique thing. Most people use third-party manufacturers. I saw what this could be. I didn't predict the supply chain issues, certainly. I didn't predict all these other issues that are hitting medtech so hard right now. But I made those decisions early on to control the process, to be able to scale it, to be able to understand it. So my team heard all of this, do this now with the sense of urgency as if it was happening the next day, but it didn't happen for 5 years. And in some ways, 6 or 7. I built out all of our infrastructure on the manufacturing floor where we're paperless and we're semi-automated in our processes. Those things take years to perfect. I did that early on and put so much urgency around it, even though I knew we had time. And it was all to be in this moment because you can't do it now. Bringing in the team, it would take 4 or 5 years to have what I have in place, 10 years in some regards, I have in place right now for the team. As they turn on sales, I'm ready on the other side of the house. So they felt it as a team, but they didn't really see kind of the horizon the way that I did because I knew that they would take longer than they said they were going to. And the gun wasn't fully loaded to their heads as a maybe bad analogy, but they had time to make mistakes and get it right and then be audited and perfected and do all the things that make for a high quality system for a very small company. And then when you add the pressures of commercialization, which is here and now today, we're pressured. We have to build, but we're pressured and building under a well thought out, vetted out infrastructure. And that makes for good quality at the end that is good for women. So those are the kinds of things that are forward thinking that the team gets to feel bits and pieces and then fast forward and go, that's why she did this.
How about balancing or ensure with someone else's input that they want to bring to the table?
I mean, I always listen to everyone. I mean, that's also part of my style. I won't necessarily take their advice, but it might stimulate something. So I always want to hear kind of people's approaches and why they chose to do it their certain way, the decisions behind their, why they made those certain decisions. It's really informative. And oftentimes I learned so much from what not to do. To see an example of a company, which happens a lot, and it's happened in women's health, where they finally get through the regulatory hurdle, and then every product they sell, they lose money. Every single one. That is your ticket to bankruptcy. And that's what's happened to a lot of these companies. You can't do it when you're ready to sell. You must do it at least 5-10 years. I started way past 10 years ago in preparing for this moment in time. So, it's really just helpful. And sometimes it's just self-validating where I get to hear the stories and go, no, okay, too late for you, but I didn't do it that way. Or that's a really great idea. I'm going to think about implementing that down the line or immediately. So it's always openness, and it may just be, we don't see eye to eye right now. And it may just be that I have to explain the why we're not eye to eye, as to kind of the thought process as to how we've gone about it. But
going back to the current state of the company and in the next several years, as you've prepared for this commercialization of these awesome products, what can you share with us around your strategy of getting Femisys products out there?
So part of my strategy is I waited for a therapeutic asset to be available and cleared through regulatory, and that's our Femisys product. I did not commercialize fully with domestically with diagnostic products. I didn't feel like the return for the investors, for the company, was enough that it would just commercialization is so expensive. We wouldn't be able to support ourselves. It wasn't enough. But I wanted the diagnostic products in the bag. I wanted to build out the bag so we would be at the ready. So we wouldn't be that story of a company that got a major asset through and then they're looking and hunting for other products. I self-growed the products in our own bag. So Femisys being cleared at the end of last year by FDA, and we have approval in Canada, allows us now to build that team. It's an infertility play. We have an infertility portfolio. We are starting with a smaller defined team to target the infertility specialists. It's a very defined small group, about 1,700 physicians, about 400 practices. The practices have been consolidating over time. You don't need a huge footprint to go to 450 places. So that's a blessing. We can start small. We can make sure our infrastructure on the sales side is as strong as it needs to be. And then ultimately, I see these infertility solutions in the way that they're designed being made available through the generalist, through the OBGYN, maybe even a family practice doc someday down the line. The person who sees the person struggling first, before they have to go through a referral, so that we can bring access to these technologies to the greater population. And in order to do that, you have to have a larger footprint. So the goal would be start small, targeted, go bigger, broader as the infrastructure continues to grow, and then roll this out. This would then be our preparedness plan for when FemBlock comes through. As a non-surgical permanent birth control that's performed in an office by an OBGYN, there's 40,000 of them around the country in multiple offices. We will be very prepared for that because our infertility portfolio will come first. So it's a very strategic way in which we're going to evolve the commercialization here.
So it's a B to B to C.
Definitely. Okay. I mean, the woman is a key constituent, particularly in our initiatives. She decides her birth control methods. She is a driving force. Or the couple decide their infertility choices. A lot of times it's out of pocket pay. So we have to have the physicians be educated. We have to embrace them. They have to be ready. And then we got to turn the patient on and educate them. So it's unique in med tech that patients will come in and ask for a particular product. But in our instance, in those particular categories, in infertility and birth control, they absolutely will.
Okay. Yeah, I think of like commercials of various types of medical products. is that like something that's involved in your go-to-market, or is it more about educating clinicians and the doctors to then bring it to patients?
I mean, my philosophy is always a doctor first. We want to make sure they're not surprised. We want to make sure they're educated. These are new products. They're opening up new segments, new opportunities for them. For the infertility, this is just new. It's brand new. So they can offer something to patients where they generally don't make it to IVF anyway. So how do you engage the full population? And then the referral source is the OBGYN. So there's education all the way around for that patient, and then educate the patient. I mean, I think if the patient comes first, you're catching people off guard. You're not educating, you're not training, you're pushing too fast. There's to me, a methodical way that this should go. And we're all about education. We're a very unique company in that we looked at lower cost in-office solutions. No one's calling really on them for in-office solutions. So we're kind of going to be uniquely be the only ones. So we take education is high priority for us so that we can make sure they're aware. If they choose not to jump on the bandwagon now and they want to come, offer these solutions down the line, so be it. But we don't want it to be that they weren't aware when patients start asking, because from a referral standpoint, patients will go somewhere else. Right? I mean, they're picking and choosing. If there's 3 infertility centers in their geography and one is offering what they want to have, and the other 2 aren't, they're going to go where the technology is. The same thing will happen with FemBlock. There'll be early adopters that women are so desperate for better solutions. Just a Dobbs decision where they're so concerned over unintended pregnancies, right? How do we not put her in that position? We bring options to the table. So, women will choose and they'll change doctors. I mean, studies and surveys have shown that if they're not getting what they need. So it's doctor first, patient second.
My last 2 questions. I'm curious on where the industry is heading, and then your vision over the next 5 to 10 years for Femisys.
Yeah, so the industry in general, let's maybe talk specific to women's health. I see a continual lack of innovation. I think these initiatives that we're seeing that may bolster some of the earlier technology, we may see this in 10, 15, 20 years.
Is there examples of companies in women's med tech, that are maybe like a North Star?
Med tech, I can't really think of anyone other than us, sad to say. There is initiative around menopause right now, which is a kind of a hot area. From let's start researching it. We don't talk about it enough. So I see in the like, this is not commonplace in the 20 years that I've been at this. People didn't talk about their infertility journeys. As an example, it's like women have been empowered to speak of it now, in light of the Alabama ruling, or just in light of social media, and people are just more connected so they can join groups. They cannot feel alone. So this was a very hush hush thing, specific to infertility and people's journeys and why weren't they having children. People are more sensitive now. So I think all of those things are positive, but where we lack is the innovation piece. So there's an awareness that there's a lack of innovation. How do we get innovation there? You still have to follow the same steps that we followed. You still have to make good products. You still have to get it through FDA. You still have to research. Those things don't happen overnight. So I feel like we're in a unique position to be able to take advantage, isn't the right way to say it, but we're just in the right moment that people are interested. They're talking about it. They want solutions, and we're at late stage. It took me 20 years to get it to here. So we're kind of at that moment. And then with that, I feel like we're going to be in a unique place to be able. So in our 5 years, I have so many additional ideas that are in the pipeline, but I also think there's great ideas that are out there that will not make it on their own. It is so expensive. We have the infrastructure of how to bring something from conception out of my brain to pieces of paper, to development, to clinical trials, through regulatory, to the quality process, to the manufacturing floor, to commercialization out the door. Not everybody has all of those pieces. So could we see other technologies or somewhere in that continuum of getting to market, find a home at Femisys? I would love for that to be the case where we're able to even bring other technologies that weren't necessarily homegrown, but play a role in improving women's health. And so in the next 5 years, not only do I believe we're going to execute on our strategy that we've been working on and commercialize and reform infertility and birth control and cervical diagnostic care and other cancer diagnostic tools that we have coming. We're going to reform those areas, but maybe we're also going to be able to take some amazing inventions that are shelved, underfunded, and be able to get them through because we have that skill set here. So that would be exciting on the horizon for us.
Awesome. Cathy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your journey in Femisys.
Thank you. Thank you so much.